They say the truth always finds its way out. But no one ever tells you how quiet it sounds when it does. My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 41 years old. And 3 months ago, I found the letter that ended my marriage. It wasn't hidden in a locked drawer or slipped inside a coat pocket. No. It was lying beneath his pillow, as if he wanted me to find it. The handwriting was careful. Familiar. The kind of neatness that doesn't belong to a stranger. At first, I thought it was from a client. My husband, Michael, ran a small architectural firm downtown, the kind of business that sent thank you notes and wine bottles during the holidays. But the letter wasn't addressed to him. It was addressed to me. Evelyn, you deserve to know the truth. I can't carry it anymore. I'm sorry. Claire. The name hit me like a ghost. Claire Bennett, my younger sister. The paper trembled in my hands as I read the rest. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't plan to fall in love with him. But it started before you and Michael were married. He promised he'd end it, once you two said your vows. But he never really did. I thought I could live with the guilt. But watching you smile at him every Sunday dinner became unbearable. He said he'd tell you before Christmas. I guess he didn't. You deserved honesty from someone. My mind went completely still. The sound of the city outside the hum of traffic. A dog barking blurred into nothing. All I could hear was the slow, methodical tearing of the world I thought I knew. For a long time, I just sat there on the edge of the bed, letter in hand, staring at the space where Michael's head had rested the night before. People always imagine betrayal as an explosion loud, catastrophic, impossible to ignore. But it wasn't like that for me. It was a slow leak. A steady collapse of the air inside a life I had spent 20 years building. When Michael came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen counter, the letter folded neatly beside a glass of wine. He kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. "You okay?" he asked casually. His voice smooth, practiced. "Long day," I said. He poured himself a drink and began talking about his latest client, a luxury renovation in the hills. New contracts. The usual hum of success. I watched him speak, studied the lines of his face, the confident way he gestured when he thought he was being impressive. He had no idea the world beneath him had already shifted. When he went upstairs to shower, I unfolded the letter again and stared at the ink. My sister's handwriting was gentle, rounded the same way she used to write me birthday cards when we were kids. I wanted to hate her immediately. But instead, I felt something else: confusion, grief, a kind of numb awe at how easily two people could rewrite your story without your permission. At dinner, I asked him about her. "Have you heard from Claire lately?" He froze for just half a second, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for me. "No," he said. "Not since last Christmas." "Why?" I smiled faintly. "Just wondering." That was when I knew the letter was real. He hadn't even thought to lie better. The days that followed moved strangely. My body still went through the motions: meetings, errands, smiles for neighbors, but everything felt like it was happening underwater. Every memory became suspect. The photo on the mantel of the three of us at Lake Clearwater, the way he'd insisted Claire stay in our guest room during her divorce, the way he'd looked at her during family dinners. Too long. Too softly. The signs had been there. I'd just been too proud. Or too trusting to translate them. On the 4th day, I called my sister. She didn't answer. On the 5th, I drove to her apartment. It was empty. The landlord said she'd left a month ago. No forwarding address. Just gone. I sat in the parking lot for almost an hour, watching the rain blur the windshield, and realized I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry yet. Just hollow. Like someone had scooped the center out of me and left the shell standing. That night, as Michael slept beside me, I opened his phone. I didn't need his passcode, it was the same as always. Our wedding anniversary. Linglo RC. The first thing I saw was an email draft. Unsent. Subject about Claire. If she ever finds out, deny everything. Say she's unstable. It'll work. Evelyn always believes the best in people. My chest tightened, but I didn't make a sound. I forwarded the draft to myself, then scrolled further. Dozens of deleted messages. Hidden folders. Hotel confirmations under fake company names. It wasn't just my sister. There were others. And something in me, something quiet and old, began to wake up. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a stranger. Not broken, not fragile, just awake. He made breakfast like normal eggs. Toast. Coffee. But my movements were deliberate. Almost graceful. Michael came down in his usual suit, still humming to himself, and kissed my cheek. "You're up early," he said. "I couldn't sleep," I replied. He didn't notice how steady my voice was. He didn't notice that I'd already taken a photo of the letter, the email, and every piece of proof he'd ever left carelessly behind. By the end of that week, I had spoken with an attorney, a woman named Marisol Vega, recommended by an old college friend. She listened quietly as I explained everything. When I showed her the letter and the evidence, she leaned back. "Her expression unreadable. He doesn't know, you know," she asked. "No." She nodded slowly. "Good. Then you have time." "For what?" "To decide whether you want justice or freedom." I thought about that for a long moment. "Can I have both?" Her smile was small, but certain. "If you're patient." Patience. It's a strange word when you've spent years being patient in all the wrong ways. I'd waited for Michael to soften. I'd waited for him to come home early. I'd waited for the marriage to feel less like performance art. But this was different. This was strategic waiting. Purposeful. Over the next few weeks, I became the woman he believed I was: calm, forgiving, a little naive. I packed his lunches, complimented his ties, laughed at his jokes. Every gesture was another brick in the wall I was quietly building between us. Meanwhile, Marisol helped me craft the kind of escape plan that didn't look like an escape at all. She drew up preliminary filings, helped me trace hidden accounts, and taught me how to move money without leaving fingerprints. "You'll need witnesses," she said one afternoon. "People who can vouch for your behavior, your stability. Because when this comes out, he'll try to flip the narrative. Men like that always do." So I started recording everything. Not with malice, with precision. I logged his absences, his calls, the way he talked about Claire in the past tense, like a man remembering a vacation he wanted to forget. The hardest part was pretending I still loved him. But maybe, in some fractured way, he still did. Not the man he was, but the man I imagined he might have been before ambition turned him into a stranger. I began writing letters to myself at night not to send, just to keep track of what was real. You are not crazy. You saw what you saw. The truth does not make you cruel. Each word was an anchor. 3 months later, Michael suggested a trip, just the two of us. He said, as if he could feel the space widening between us. He booked a weekend in Vermont, in the same inn where we'd spent our honeymoon. I agreed instantly. It looked relieved. Even smoke. "See," he said. "Told you we just needed a reset." But I already knew what would happen there. Because sometimes closure isn't given to you, you have to script it yourself. And I had. I packed light one suitcase. One envelope. Inside that envelope were 3 things: a printed copy of Claire's letter, the email draft he never sent, and the notarized documents Marisol helped me prepare. When we checked into the inn, snow was falling. The air smelled like pine and cinnamon, exactly as it had years ago. Everything looked the same except me. At dinner, Michael raised his glass. "To us," he said. "To honesty," I replied. He laughed. "You sound serious." I smiled faintly. "You have no idea." The dining room smelled like roasted herbs and old memories. The same candles. The same violinist in the corner, playing that soft melody Michael loved. But I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt strangely present, as if every second of my life had led to this quiet table under amber light. Michael ordered the wine we had on our wedding night. He was trying. I could tell. Or maybe he was just performing the idea of effort. He reached across the table and brushed my hand with his fingers. "You look beautiful tonight," he said. "Thank you," I replied. And for once, I didn't flinch. For most of our marriage, compliments from him had always come laced with expectation. He'd say, "You look beautiful," then follow it with, "See what happens when you put in effort." But tonight he didn't add anything. Maybe because he believed the act was working. The waiter poured the wine. Michael lifted his glass. "To second chances," he said. "I lifted mine. To finally seeing things clearly." He smiled, unaware of the double meaning. We talked about work, about the weather, about the friends we hadn't seen in a while. His laughter filled the space between us. Warm and disarming. It almost fooled me. Almost. But then his phone buzzed on the table, and I caught the brief flash of a name across the screen. Clara Client Inquiry. Clara. He'd misspelled her name this time. He saw my eyes flick toward it and quickly flipped the phone over. "Work stuff," he said. "I'll deal with it later." I nodded. Of course. But that was the moment the last flicker of affection inside me extinguished. The moment I realized he didn't even feel guilt anymore, just inconvenience. When dessert came, I excused myself to the restroom. My reflection in the mirror looked calm, almost serene. I took the envelope from my purse and held it in both hands, the paper warm from being close to me all night. When I returned to the table, he was on his phone, smiling faintly, his thumb moving fast. He didn't notice me until I sat down. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said softly. "I just needed a moment." He put the phone down, leaning back in his chair. "You've been quiet lately. Is everything all right between us?" That question almost made me laugh. But instead, I placed the envelope on the table between us. "You tell me." He looked at it, confused. "What's this?" "Just something that was waiting for me at home." He picked it up, flipped it over. His expression didn't change until he recognized the handwriting. Then, slowly, the color drained from his face. "Claire," he whispered. I watched the muscles in his jaw tighten. He didn't open it immediately. He didn't have to. He already knew what it said. "How long?" he finally asked. "Long enough?" He stared at me, calculating, maybe searching for a version of this moment he could control. "You don't understand. Evelyn, she was going through a divorce. She needed support. It was an accident." I interrupted. His eyes flicked up to mine, startled. "What?" "That's what you were going to say." "Right. That it just happened. Like the weather." He sighed, leaning forward, voice softening. It was complicated. Love usually is when it starts in someone else's marriage. He didn't respond. I could see the flicker of anger behind his restraint. The same look he used when a client dared to question him. "Are you going to let me explain?" he asked. "I think you already did," I said, sliding my wine glass aside. "I read your email draft." "Michael." His head snapped up. "You what?" "The one you never sent. The one where you said you'd tell people Claire was unstable if I ever found out." He froze completely, mouth half open. For the first time in our marriage, he looked small. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply said, "You plan to destroy me to protect your lie." He rubbed his temples, muttering, "You're overreacting. It wasn't like that." "I think I'm reacting just enough," I said. "You built a life on half-truths and thought I'd never notice." His voice rose. I made a mistake. One mistake. I laughed quietly. You made a pattern. The waiter approached, sensing tension. Everything all right here? I smiled up at him. Perfect. Thank you. Could we get the check? Michael said nothing. In the car. The silence was a living thing. He kept glancing at me like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the version that might save him. When we pulled into the inn's driveway, snow was falling heavier now, muting every sound. The headlights caught the flakes as they drifted across the windshield. Delicate. Relentless. Inside the room, I lit the small fireplace and sat on the edge of the bed. Michael stood by the window, his reflection overlapping with the falling snow outside. Why didn't you say anything sooner? He asked quietly. Because I wanted to see who you'd be when you didn't know I knew. He turned to me, eyes narrowing. You set me up. No, I said, meeting his gaze. I watched you. For a long moment. Neither of us moved. Then he came closer, crouching slightly to meet my eyes. Evelyn, listen to me. I never stopped loving you. The words might have worked once, but not anymore. Love, I said softly, doesn't hide in email drafts or behind fake names. He straightened slowly, jaw tightening. You're really going to throw everything away because of one letter? I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm reclaiming what was already mine. He laughed bitterly. You can't survive without me. I smiled faintly. You sound just like her. He frowned. What? Claire. The night before she disappeared. She told me the same thing on the phone. You won't make it without him. Imsel. His face went still. She called you. Yes, I said, my voice quiet. The night she left town. I never told you because I wanted to see how long you'd pretend she was just a client. He sank into the armchair by the fireplace, staring at the flames. You think you know everything? No, I said, but I know enough. He fell asleep on the couch that night. I watched him from the bed, the rise and fall of his chest, the familiar outline of the man I'd once built my future around. When I woke at dawn, he was gone. His clothes, his suitcase, even his watch from the nightstand, all missing. But he left something behind. Under his pillow, folded neatly, was a note written on hotel stationery. I'll make this right. You'll regret embarrassing me. There was no signature. He didn't need one. That morning, I drove home through the snow in absolute silence. No radio. No phone. Just the rhythm of the tires cutting through slush. Marisol called as I turned into my driveway. Did he know? Yes, I said. Good. That's the first step. The first step to what? To watching him bury himself. She explained how he'd already triggered half the traps we'd quietly set joint accounts under review. Transactions flagged for irregularities. The moment he'd tried to move assets, the system had caught him. Now we wait, she said, and you live your life like nothing happened. That was harder than it sounded. Because the thing about betrayal isn't just the person who betrays you, it's the way it rewrites your reflection. You start questioning every version of yourself that loved them. I began rebuilding small pieces of normalcy. I took walks. I started painting again soft watercolors of the lake outside our home. I stopped checking my phone every hour, waiting for an apology that wasn't coming. But the quiet didn't last. 2 weeks later, I came home to find the front door slightly open. I froze. The air inside felt off colder, unsettled. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. The living room looked normal. Except for one thing. The framed photo of my wedding day lay face down on the floor. The glass was cracked. I knew he'd been there. The next morning, Marisol called again. Don't panic, she said. He can't touch you legally. The injunction's already filed. But it wasn't fear I felt, it was resolve. Michael had taken everything I gave him and turned it into a weapon. Now I was going to use his own arrogance against him. Because I'd learned something watching him all those years. Men who think they're untouchable never look down until it's too late. And I was done being the woman beneath his shadow. The days that followed felt suspended in fog. I woke up early, made coffee, worked, slept, and repeated the same hollow routine while the rest of the world moved on, as if nothing had happened. But underneath the surface, everything was changing. Marisol called it the gathering phase. She said, "He's still trying to control the narrative. He'll use guilt, threats, silence, whatever keeps you uncertain. Don't react. Just document." So I documented every message, every phone call, every strange envelope that appeared in my mailbox. I kept them in a folder labeled Echoes is a Quiet, private archive of the man he was when no one was watching. The first message came at 2 a.m. One night. "You're making a mistake. You don't know what you're starting." Then another. A few days later. "You think you're innocent in this. You think she didn't choose me." That last one broke something in me, not out of pain, but disgust. The fact that he could still use my sister's name as leverage made me realize he wasn't panicking. He was fighting to keep his reflection intact. So I stopped responding. Instead, I took a leave of absence from work and started visiting the small lakeside property my mother left me. It had sat empty for years, too full of memories. But now it became my refuge. The air there was clean in a way. The city never was sharp. Still, almost sacred. I repainted the walls, stripped the floors, and rebuilt the dock one plank at a time. It was exhausting. Physical work. And every swing of the hammer felt like therapy. Each nail driven in was a little piece of the silence I was reclaiming. Sometimes, I'd stand at the edge of the lake and talk to my mother out loud, as if she could hear me through the wind. I told her about the letter, about Claire, about the lies stacked like stones. I told her how I still loved the man who ruined me, and how that made me hate myself a little. Then one morning, as I was packing up tools, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "If you want to know what really happened to Claire, meet me at the cafe on Birch Street. Noon. Come alone." My pulse quickened. For a long time, I just stared at the message, unsure if it was bait or mercy. When I finally arrived at the cafe, the air smelled like burnt espresso and old wood. A man sat in the corner, fidgeting with a folded napkin. I recognized him instantly, Daniel Hayes, one of Michael's old business partners. He'd been at our house dozens of times, drinking wine on the patio, laughing with that empty corporate charm I used to think was friendship. He looked thinner now, exhausted. "Evelyn," he said quietly, gesturing for me to sit. "What is this?" I asked. He sighed, glancing around before lowering his voice. "You're not crazy for what you think, but it's worse than you realize." I leaned forward. "Go on." "Michael didn't just cheat," Daniel said. "He used Claire. She wasn't just an affair, she was leverage. Her name's on several documents connected to his offshore accounts. He told her she'd be rich, that he'd leave you once the transfers cleared." My stomach twisted, and when she found out, she threatened to go to the police. That's when she disappeared. I felt my hands tremble. Disappeared. How? He looked at me carefully. "You really don't know. Do you? Tell me." She didn't move away. "She's dead. Evelyn." The words hit me like ice water. I just sat there, staring at him, my mouth dry. It continued quietly. "She drove off the Ridgeway Bridge last year. They said it was an accident. But she'd called me the night before, terrified. Said Michael was following her. The cops wrote it off as suicide." I pressed my hand to my chest, struggling to breathe. Daniel leaned closer. He made her sign false documents to cover his fraud. When she realized it, she panicked. She tried to back out. He couldn't afford that. I shook my head. "No. I'd have known someone would have told me. He made sure no one did. He paid off her landlord, cleared her debts, deleted her social accounts. He erased her. I sat there, numb, staring at the steam curling from my untouched coffee. Daniel placed a small flash drive on the table. Everything you need is on there. Emails, transfers, her signature on the fake contracts. If you really want to destroy him, this is how. I stared at it. Why are you giving this to me? He gave a weary smile. Because I'm next. He's already turning on me, blaming me for the books. And because Claire didn't deserve what happened to her. I nodded slowly, unable to speak. When I left the cafe, the sun was blinding. The world around me moved as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. As if the truth hadn't just hollowed me out completely. I drove back to the lake house in silence, parked, and sat in the car until my hands stopped shaking. Then I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The files were overwhelming, hundreds of documents. Screenshots. Audio recordings. One folder was named C. B. I opened it and found a video clip. The image was grainy, but there was no mistaking her face. Claire sat in front of a window, eyes swollen, voice trembling. If anything happens to me, she whispered, tell Evelyn I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this. I thought he loved me, but he only loves control. Please, don't let him bury the truth. The video cut off abruptly. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank screen. Then I whispered her name. And for the first time since finding that letter, I cried. Not the silent tears of endurance, but the kind that come from a place so deep, they have no sound. When the tears finally stopped, something inside me settled cold. Clear. Unwavering. I emailed Marisol that night. It's time. The next morning, she met me at the courthouse. We filed charges of fraud, falsification, and obstruction. She submitted the digital evidence anonymously through the state attorney's office, so my name wouldn't appear until later. But legal justice was only half of it. I wanted him to face what he'd done, not just in court, but in the mirror. Marisol warned me. If you go public, it'll get ugly. You'll be dragged through everything. Your marriage, your family, your sister's death. I nodded. I know, but silence is what killed her. So we planned something he couldn't twist or bury. Michael was hosting a fundraiser the following week for his firm's anniversary, a polished public event full of investors, clients, and press. He'd built his entire reputation on being the charming, philanthropic architect of family values. I decided that's where it would end. I called the event coordinator and confirmed my attendance. The woman on the phone sounded delighted. Mrs. Hart. It'll be wonderful to see you again, Mr. Hart said you might not come. Oh, I said lightly. He's in for a surprise. The night of the fundraiser, I wore a simple black gown, elegant, understated, the kind of outfit that made people listen before they judged. When I arrived, Michael was already surrounded by photographers, smiling that politician's smile he'd perfected. The crowd parted slightly when he saw me. For a moment, I could see confusion flicker across his face, followed by irritation. Evelyn, he said smoothly, taking my hand as if we were still married. I didn't expect you here. Clearly, I said, matching his smile. He leaned closer. What are you doing? Celebrating, I replied. After all, this is the anniversary of your empire. Isn't it? He gave a tense laugh. We'll talk later. But later came sooner than he expected. Because just as he stepped up to the microphone to begin his speech, the projector behind him flickered to life. The lights dimmed, and the first frame that appeared on the massive screen wasn't his company logo. It was Claire. Her face filled the screen, crying, terrified, whispering the words that had haunted me since I found that video. Please, don't let him bury the truth. Gasps filled the room. The audio echoed through the speakers. Michael froze mid-sentence. I stood at the back of the room, calm and still, watching the empire he'd built begin to burn from the inside. The room fractured in an instant. Shock rippled through the crowd like a living thing whispers. Gasps. The scrape of chairs against the floor. The screen played on, filling the ballroom with the trembling voice of my sister. Her final words, echoing beneath the chandeliers. Michael's face drained of color. He turned toward the screen. Frozen. His mouth slightly open as though he could still talk his way out of it. But there were no words left to manipulate. No script to save him. I watched from the back of the room, my glass of champagne untouched. The video ended abruptly, replaced by a slideshow of documents, bank transfers, forged signatures, account statements. The crowd turned restless. Investors, colleagues, reporters all murmuring the same name, Claire Bennett. Someone shouted, "Is this real?" Another voice followed. "Where did this come from?" Michael's PR manager rushed to the stage. But the damage was done. The truth had already scorched the air. He finally spotted me across the room. Our eyes met for the first time since Vermont. For a moment, he looked almost human small. Frightened. Cornered. Then his expression hardened. He mouthed one word across the distance between us. "You." "Yes. Me." I didn't look away. Security moved in moments later. The event dissolved into chaos. People gathering coats. Reporters pulling out cameras. Michael trying to shout over the noise. "This is slander. It's fabricated." But no one believed him. His voice had the desperate pitch of a man who'd been caught lying too many times. I walked toward the exit calmly, ignoring the flashes of cameras and the swirl of voices behind me. Every step felt lighter than the last, as though the years of silence were finally peeling off layer by layer. Outside, the night was cold and clear. Snowflakes clung to my hair, melting into tiny drops on my shoulders. For a long moment, I just stood there breathing, feeling the air burn its way into my lungs. My phone buzzed. It was Marisol. "Is it done?" she asked. "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "Then you should stay somewhere safe tonight. He'll come unhinged." "I'm not afraid anymore," I said softly. "Good," she said. "But be careful anyway. Men like him don't lose quietly." She was right. 2 hours later, while I sat in my car outside my lake house, my headlights caught a shape moving near the porch. I froze, watching the figure approach. He stepped into the light. Michael. His coat was half-buttoned, his hair wet from snow. He looked nothing like the polished man who'd once stood beside me at business galas. He looked feral, cornered. Undone. I locked the doors, cracked the window just enough to speak. "You shouldn't be here." "Open the door." "Evelyn." "No." He stepped closer, palms raised. "I just want to talk. You've said enough for a lifetime." He gave a bitter laugh. "You think this fixes anything? You think humiliating me makes you clean?" "This wasn't about humiliation," I said evenly. "It was about truth." He slammed his hand against the car window, making me flinch. "You destroyed me." I stared at him, my voice calm. "No. Michael, you destroyed yourself." I just turned on the light. For a moment, I saw something flicker in his expression, fear. Maybe. Then it vanished. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "You have no idea what you've started. They're going to dig into everything. Into you. I've got nothing to hide." He smiled faintly. "Everyone has something." And then, just like that, he walked away back into the snow, into the dark. The police came an hour later. I didn't call them. They came on their own, acting on a tip about a domestic disturbance. They took a statement, inspected the property, then told me they'd keep patrols nearby for the next few days. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards made me tense. Every gust of wind felt like his breath against my neck. But the next morning, something strange happened. When I opened my door, there was an envelope on the porch. No stamp, no handwriting on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. You think you've won? Check the bank vault. Box 19. No signature. But I didn't need one. I drove into the city before sunrise. The streets were empty, glistening with frost. My reflection followed me through every traffic light, calm, focused, unflinching. The bank opened at 9. I waited in the lobby until a young teller led me to the safe deposit area. Box 19 slid out with a metallic click. Inside was a USB drive and a photograph. The photo was of me and Claire taken years ago at the lake house. We were laughing, her arm around me. On the back, someone had written in bold black ink, "You never really knew her." My hands trembled as I plugged the USB into my laptop. There were dozens of files, audio recordings, emails, photos, and then a folder labeled Confession. I clicked it. Michael's voice filled the room. "This is for whoever finds it. I didn't kill her. She was unstable. She came to me that night. Drunk, screaming she'd expose everything. She grabbed the wheel. I tried to stop her, but she drove off the bridge. It was an accident, but no one will believe me now." I felt cold all over. I did love her. His voice continued. "But Evelyn will never understand that. She doesn't understand me at all. She never did." The recording ended with a soft, broken laugh. I sent everything to Marisol. She called 20 minutes later. "He's unraveling." She said, "That message to you proves he's watching. You need to let the authorities handle this now." But I couldn't stop thinking about his voice, the way it trembled between guilt and self-pity. He still thought he could narrate his own story. That night, I wrote my own. I opened my laptop and began drafting an open letter, not to the police, not to the press, but to the truth itself. For years, I believed love was forgiveness, that endurance was strength. But silence only feeds the disease that destroys women like my sister and wives like me. I am not ashamed of the truth. I am ashamed. I stayed quiet for so long. I published it anonymously on a victims' advocacy forum. Within hours, it spread. People began sharing it under headlines like "The Architect's Wife Speaks" and "The Betrayed Woman's Manifesto." Messages poured in from women who'd lived the same story in different forms. Their words filled my inbox like waves: solidarity, grief, fury. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. The next morning, I woke to a knock at the door. It was the police again. But this time, their faces were grim. "Mrs. Hart," the officer said quietly, "we found your husband's car last night, near Ridgeway Bridge." My breath caught. "He's gone." The officer nodded. "We believe he jumped." The same bridge. The same ending. I thanked them, closed the door, and sank to the floor. For a long time, I just sat there in the quiet, trying to feel something: grief, relief, anything. But all I felt was the weight of symmetry. He'd chosen the same place he drove Claire off. The same water that swallowed her had taken him too. It felt like the universe had tied its knot. A week later, the search teams recovered his body. The official report called it suicide by drowning. The media turned it into a spectacle for a few days. And then the world moved on. But I didn't. I went back to the bridge. Snow had melted, leaving the air sharp and clear. I stood there, looking down at the water, remembering the night I first read the letter under his pillow. How naive I'd been. How small. The current below moved slowly, reflecting the pale sky. For a moment, I imagined their faces there, his and hers, flickering like ghosts just beneath the surface. I whispered, "You both got what you wanted. You're finally free of each other. Then I turned and walked away, because this time, the story didn't end with fire or water. It ended with choice. Mine. For months after Michael's death, I lived in a strange kind of quiet. Not peace exactly, but the quiet that comes when the noise finally stops the hum of anxiety, the second-guessing, the constant need to brace for impact. I'd grown so used to chaos that stillness felt like a foreign language. I had to relearn syllable by syllable. The police came by one final time to close out the case. No foul play, they said, though the tone in the detective's voice told me he wasn't entirely sure. But they had nothing else to investigate. The files, the recordings, the evidence. All of it pointed to a man cornered by his own secrets, who chose an ending that made him the victim instead of the villain. That was always his way. I didn't go to the funeral. David, his younger brother, called to ask if I'd reconsider. It would look good for the papers, he said, as if grief were a PR strategy. I told him I'd already said goodbye to Michael years ago, he just hadn't noticed. Instead, I spent that day at the lake house, painting. It started as therapy but had become something else, a language I didn't need to translate. My canvases were full of muted tones, gray water, broken docks, soft horizons. Nothing literal, but everything real. That afternoon, as I rinsed my brushes, I found myself thinking about Claire, about how easily she had been rewritten. Era Sid, reduced to a footnote in a scandal. She deserved more than a headline. So, I wrote her story. Not a confession, not a revenge piece, just the truth. Told the way she should have told it if she'd been given time. It began with the sentence, "My name was Claire Bennett, and I believed the wrong man could be saved." I sent it to a journalist who had covered the Hart case early on, a woman named Nora Sims, who'd reached out to me months ago for a comment I never gave. I told her I wasn't ready then, but now I was. She called 2 days later, her voice gentle, almost reverent. "Evelyn, it's powerful. We'll run it under your byline if you want." "No," I said. "Run it under hers." And she did. The article went live on a Thursday morning, within hours. It spread shared, debated, praised, torn apart. But I didn't read the comments. I didn't need to. For the first time, Claire had her voice back. That evening, I sat by the fire, reading the letter I had written to her months ago and never mailed. "You were wrong, Claire. I did make it without him. But I wish I could have saved you before either of us realized who he really was. You were my sister, before you were his secret. And that's the version of you I'll remember." I folded the letter and placed it in a small wooden box with the others I'd written to myself. To my mother. Even to him. Letters that were never meant to be sent. Only released. When spring came, I burned them all. Not out of hate, but release. The paper curled, blackened, then drifted upward in slow, dancing fragments. I watched them dissolve into smoke until the sky took them. It felt like giving the past a proper burial. Afterward, I sat on the porch, breathing in the faint scent of ash and pine. The air was cool, the kind that carried echoes instead of noise. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for anything, not closure. Not forgiveness. Not even redemption. Just life. Weeks turned into months. The investigation closed. The company dissolved. The scandal faded into memory. I sold the house in the city and kept only the lake house. I grew herbs by the window. Adopted a rescue dog I named Clover. And learned the art of doing small things with deliberate care, cooking, reading, sleeping without nightmares. But healing doesn't move in straight lines. Sometimes it looped back in ways I didn't expect. A certain cologne on a stranger. A song on the radio. The echo of a door closing softly in another room. Each one carried a ghost. And yet, each time, the memory hurt less. It was like touching an old scar still there. Still tender. But no longer open. One morning, I woke to a letter in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name. Written in sharp, slanted handwriting. Inside was a single page. You don't know me. But Claire helped me once. I was in a situation like hers. Someone older. Powerful. Manipulative. She told me to leave before it was too late. I did. I'm alive because of her. I saw your article. Thank you for reminding the world who she really was. I sat at the table for a long time after reading it. The tears that came this time were gentle. Almost kind. The universe had found a way to answer her after all. In early summer, I began hosting small writing workshops at the lake house. Just women. Some strangers. Some neighbors. The rule was simple. Tell the story you've been afraid to tell. We met every Sunday afternoon by the water. Notebooks in hand. Tea cooling in chipped mugs. It started with awkward silences. Then turned into laughter. Then into tears. And every week, I watched women set their pain down on paper and breathe easier afterward. One afternoon, after the last student left, I found a note left on my table. It read, "You turn grief into language, and language into light. That's your real revenge." I smiled. Maybe they were right. Because revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about destruction. It was about definition. It was about choosing what survives the fire and what doesn't. The anniversary of Claire's death came quietly that year. I drove to Ridgeway Bridge at dawn. When the fog still clung to the water like a veil, I carried 2 lavender sprigs and one of her bracelets, the silver one she'd worn in every childhood photo. I tossed them into the river, watching them float away until they disappeared into the current. For a moment, I thought I heard her voice in the wind soft, almost laughing, and I realized that maybe ghosts don't linger because they're trapped. Maybe they linger to make sure we don't forget. I whispered. I didn't. Then I turned away. That night, as the sky bruised into twilight, I sat by the fire again. Clover lay asleep at my feet. My laptop screen glowed faintly, the cursor blinking on a blank page. I began typing the first line of my new book. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about how truth sounds when a woman finally stops whispering. The rest flowed naturally, like a confession to no one and everyone at once. When I was done, I leaned back and closed my eyes. The silence around me wasn't empty anymore. It was full of all the things I had finally made peace with. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not because justice had been served, but because I no longer needed it to be. Sometimes the truest revenge isn't in the ruin. It's in the rebuilding. And maybe that's what my sister was trying to teach me all along. If you've ever lived through betrayal, you know it doesn't end with an apology or a courtroom. It ends when you choose to stop living in the ruins someone else built for you. When you choose to name yourself again not as victim, not as survivor, but as something in between, still here, still breathing, still capable of softness. That's what I am now. Still here, still breathing, still capable of softness. If my story touched you, if you've ever felt broken but found a way to rebuild yourself piece by piece, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that remind us that healing isn't weakness, it's the quietest kind of strength. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to let go of someone you once thought you couldn't live without? I'll be reading every word.